And join us on the Plus Sides, Cracking the Obesity Code, the groundbreaking podcast helping people change their lives one episode at a time. The Plus Sides podcast is a disruptor. We're breaking down barriers, smashing stereotypes, and sharing inspiring stories that'll leave you feeling informed and empowered. Join us every week to learn from doctors who are specialists around GLP-1 medications like Ozempic, Wegovy, and ManOnMounjaro. They'll provide you with science and facts to validate these incredible stories. But that's not all. We'll also bring you the voices of the GLP-1 Mounjaro TikTok community, real people who face the challenges of obesity-related diseases and disorders and discovered the incredible plus sides of GLP-1 medications. Our episodes are filled with heartwarming stories, laughter, and moments of triumph. You'll connect with our amazing community members who are reclaiming their health and experiencing their fullest lives. Are you ready to embark on a journey of discovery and empowerment? Tune in to the Plus Sides, Cracking the Obesity Code, and together we'll change the narrative around obesity and end the stigma. Subscribe now on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform and join our incredible community. Let's celebrate the plus sides of life together, because every story deserves to be heard. Every life deserves to shine, and everyone deserves access to expert knowledge and medication. The Plus Sides Podcast. You're not alone. It's not your fault.
Alive on the moon, Jaro, it's on the pen alive, with your host David Knapp.
Thank you, Claptrack, and happy Thursday nights. I'm Dave Knapp, ManOnMounjaro. That's why I'm here. You are on the pen. That's why you're here. Wegovy, Saxenda, Victoza, Trulicity, Mounjaro, Zepbound, Viking Tide, Amgen 133, the goofy one that we'll talk about later where tirzepatide's being mixed with this lady shot. Yeah, it's a whole deal. We'll talk about it all tonight on the pen. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate the opportunity to spend some time with each and every one of you every single week. Marty, Sandra, Dink, Corey, J-May, Anna, Cloakster, Sue the Dude, Clark Kent, all y'all. Thank you for being here. It's such a pleasure to be able to spend some time with you every week. I love this show, and I love doing this with you. So a little bit different show tonight. I actually was back and forth on whether we would even have a show tonight, because as you all know, this week was the earnings call from Eli Lilly. Today was an earnings call from Novo Nordisk. It takes a tremendous amount of work to keep up with that, especially when you were expecting that, I don't know, hey, Sabrina, especially when you're expecting to get some really great news about Eli Lilly releasing vials, and then they just slap you down. So anyways, wanted to do a show tonight. Hey, Mike. Hey, Rudy. Thank you for being here. And bring you a really interesting interview that I got the chance to do with a local Bloomberg affiliate on the radio this week. So I grew up listening to talk radio in the back of my dad's car from the time that I was basically a fetus. I was listening to this radio station, and it's a 50,000 watt radio station. So the AM radio station reaches far and wide across the country. And so it was so cool to be in their studio, to be talking about On the Pen and the things that we're doing here. And so I am going to share that interview with you. It is a radio interview. So I just sort of like dubbed a picture in there. So you're going to have to bear with me, but it was an interesting interview. Everything didn't come out exactly the way that I wanted to all the time, but I felt like it was a really good interview and a really good opportunity to just advance the narrative, not only about these medications and the stigma around these medications. Hey, Mimi, welcome. But also about the topic of obesity and diabetes and the stigma around it. And so we're just doing everything we can to help people and to change the narrative. And this was another step forward in that process. So I'm going to share that with you all tonight. And so I hope you'll stick around for it. Make sure that while you come in here that you hit that like, hit that bell, and hit that sub so that you get notifications for everything we do on this channel. And we're going to get right in tonight with some housekeeping. Housekeeping. One of the very coolest things that happened this past week, in addition to this interview that I got to do, was the fact that at one point, the podcast hit number 14th in the country for medicine podcasts. Now, to give you an idea of who's, in the top couple positions, Atia is in the top position. Dr. Saladino is in the top position. We're RFK Jr. We're talking about some heavyweights, and this heavyweight, pun intended, hit 14th in the friggin' country, and that's thanks to you. So if you have gotten a chance to see the podcast, put OTP in the chat, because you have helped get that podcast to where it's at, and I so thank you. And thank you especially to those of you who took the time this week to go to the podcast, to leave it a 5-star rating and review. The link should be in the description of this video. I'm not 100% sure that it is, but you got to check this out. Just a couple more great reviews were left this week, and I like to get into the habit of sharing them because I so appreciate them, because they're so kind, well thought out, and I just appreciate them. So this week we got one from Just Papas, who said, great information, and it helps a lot, with a 5-star review. Jay Hicks Apple said, I so appreciate Dave in keeping us current on all things GLP-1. Knowledge Seeker said, grateful for his podcast and all things GLP-1 business related. Things are changing quickly, and it helps to have someone focused on this content. So thank you for the reviews. Those are really such an encouragement to me each week. This holy smokes, Corey Stevenson with a $99.99 super chat. Corey is going to choose where this injection goes tonight. I doubt anybody's going to top that. Thank you so much for that generosity, Corey. Holy smokes. Of course, we had Corey on just a few weeks ago sharing her journey on tirzepatide. So thank you so much for that. I almost missed it because I'm looking down reading my phone. So thank you so much for that generosity. But the biggest super chat of the night chooses where I get this. You see that? What number's on there? You see that? 15. We got the 15 going tonight. So awesome. Thank you, Corey. That's so generous. So thank you for all of the great feedback on the podcast, the reviews. We're making waves. One of these days, I want to crack the top 10. So if you want to help me crack the top 10, what you got to do is you got to go over to the podcast, preferably Apple Podcasts. But if you get it from Google or you get it from Spotify, I think that all plays into it. Make sure that you download the podcast. Give it a 5-star rating and give it a review. That really is helping to move the needle. So thank you for those who are doing that. I so greatly appreciate it. It is just, I just every week something happens on this channel, whether we get a Bloomberg article or we're on Yahoo Finance, or today talking to a CNN reporter, the podcast hitting 14th in the country. I just go, how is this happening? I was just a year ago, a guy in the corner of his basement, just like having fun with it. And I still am. And it's like just amazing the attention that this has gotten. But I think, also not to undersell what we've done here. I mean, when I came to YouTube, and you'll hear more about this on the interview tonight, there was such a deficit of information. There was a lot of content about, I lost 100 pounds on a GLP-1, and this is what I ate. And that's all great content, but I wanted to know more about the medicine. I wanted to know more about what I was putting in my body. I wanted to know more about the company that was making it. And I fell in love with Mounjaro and the science behind it, and Eli Lilly, the company. And that's the type of knowledge that we've shared here, and we've shared the news, the breaking news. And so OnThePen, the weekly dose, that's what that podcast is all about. It's your one-stop shop for incretin mimetic therapy news. It's about 15 minutes long each week. It's called OnThePen, the weekly dose. So make sure that you check that podcast out. And of course, we've done the show OnThePen every Thursday night at 9 p.m. We do this every week. And this is the 63rd or 64th episode that we've done here. And this is so fun. I love doing this every week with you. I was just telling the before, if you would have been on with the members, I do a members only live stream before this. And the members only live stream goes kind of like this. Hey guys, how's it going? How's everybody doing tonight? I hope you're well. Yeah, we got a good show tonight. I mean, like I was telling them, like, there's something about the show that I get invigorated. I get a lot of energy from doing this. And so thank you, because we need especially this energy when we're walking around Terzepa tired all the time. So thank you again for being here. Thank you for all the accolades and nice comments and reviews that you sent my way over on the podcast. It's just doing tremendously. And I couldn't have imagined that it was going to do what it has done and get the attention that it has. So thank you. Let's get into what's fresh this week, because there's a lot to talk about. We could take this segment about 150 ways this week. There was so much to talk about. Oh, Mimi with the $3 super sticker. Thank you for that, Mimi. I greatly appreciate that over in Australia. Mimi was on just a couple of weeks ago sharing her experience on the Retatrutide trial over in Australia. So if you missed that, make sure that you get it. So I think that we would be remiss to not talk about the Eli Lilly earnings call and how I'm feeling about the lack of vial releasage, right? So I really, really thought that the timing was going to work out, that on the earnings call, we were going to hear, they approved the vials in March. We know that the vials for Zepbound are going to come here if they come anywhere, because Zepbound is only approved in the United States. And so far, we've only heard of ex-US markets getting Mounjaro. Even for weight loss indications, they're just not rebranding it. That point was actually reiterated on the earnings call, but was not reiterated or even talked about at all was the vials. It just wasn't brought up. So I have a couple of ideas about why this is, and I don't think it's because vials aren't coming. And I also don't think that it's because there's a shortage of the API, the active pharmaceutical ingredient. Here's what's happening in my estimate, because I've dealt with this question 100 times over the last couple months, talking about the release of the vials. Listen, the reason that the countries that get the vials of Mounjaro are in shortage is because those countries don't pay anything for the medication compared to what we do here. So when you talk about a publicly traded company trying to hit their earnings targets, are they going to utilize their manufacturing capacity to serve markets where they don't make anything for the drug? Or are they going to maximize the markets in a shortage where they actually make a ton of money? The answer is obvious, right? They're going to prioritize the American market because we pay a bunch of money for the medicine here. Like we complain all the time about how much we pay for medicines, and rightfully so, right? Let's get loud about that. Go, Bernie, go. But the important thing to remember is we do get a benefit for the fact that we pay the most. It's like when the rich guy comes into the restaurant and all the tables are full, they're going to find a spot for the rich guy. That's the same kind of concept here. They've been serving the American market because this is where the revenue comes from. So what happened during this earnings call is they didn't talk about the vials at all. Matter of fact, only thing that was really brought up was, could they bring the quick pens to the United States? The quick pens are being launched. And they were launched in the UK. Now we know that it's going to be launched in Europe as well, in that market. But they also sort of low-key said, hey, we're adjusting our earnings forecast through the end of the year by $2 billion. Now, they were pressed at the end of the earnings call. And honestly, if you go back and listen, the guy, I can't remember who he was with, but he kind of laughed when he said, he goes, all right, I'm having a hard time truing up where this $2 billion is coming from. And they did say early in the call, it would be on the heels of, or on the back of Zepbound and Mounjaro. So how are you going to get there? And Anat Ashkenazi, who's the CFO, very poised, very confident, very smart, very intelligent. I mean, just like you don't get to where you get in life without being that way. But I say that because I've listened to like 6 or 7 earnings calls now, and I've always been astounded at her ability to articulate Lily's point of view, right? She completely talked in circles, and it was a very dodgy answer. It's like, well, we bought this factory in Wisconsin. Yeah, but you told us this factory wasn't coming online until 2025. The Concord site in North Carolina is coming along. that was always going to be a Q4. It was going to be online. As a matter of fact, I think if I go back to a couple of earnings calls before, I believe Dave Ricks told us that the Triangle Park facility was coming online line by line. Like it wasn't as if you were going to get a deluge. The thing was just going to do a ribbon cutting and boom, all the lines are going. No, there are multiple lines coming on at different times. So I think they're already contributing in some way. So I don't think that they're just boom going to come up with $2 billion there. Could it be the ex-US markets opening in Europe? Yeah, but the ex-US markets, if you look at the amount of money that they made over the last quarter and how much of it came from ex-US markets, it's very little. It's a drop in the bucket, right? That $2 billion has got to be coming from somewhere. They're going to have to make it come from somewhere. And at some point, the shortages are going to get so bad. And what got lost in this earnings call is the fact that they lost a ton of market share. First of all, they missed their forecast for Mounjaro. They missed their forecast. And then with today's Novo Nordisk earnings call, obviously we knew this beforehand, but with the Novo Nordisk earnings call today, it underscored the fact that Ozempic went up. Wegovy went up, right? Just when Eli Lilly was catching up with the market share, they went into these crazy shortages. Now you see Novo Nordisk sort of taking off with their medications that are rivals to Mounjaro and Zepbound. Now, we've talked about this a lot on this channel. This isn't a race for market share right now. That's relatively insignificant. What they're in a race for is manufacturing capacity. That's why you saw Novo Nordisk make this massive move to acquire Catalent. Catalent being one of the biggest generics manufacturer in the world. They actually manufacture tirzepatide or Mounjaro and Zepbound for Eli Lilly. They have contracts with them. They basically, every big pharmaceutical company you could name in the world works with Catalent to fulfill some level of their medication. Novo just goes, here's $16 billion. We want all your capacity. And we want it for semaglutide. And we want it for CagriSema. And we want it eventually for amycretin. So if this goes through, this is another thing. If the Catalent deal goes through with Novo Nordisk by the end of this year, that will be devastating for the Eli Lilly supply. They will have no choice but to start, basically just like you pull up to Eli Lilly and they just shoot you with tirzepatide with a garden hose and you just drive through, you get what you can and just keep moving. They're never going to be able to keep up without Catalent. So that will be a fascinating one to watch. I don't know if it'll happen. Novo Nordisk is saying that they initially anticipated that would be consummated by the end of the year. It sounds like regulators are not going to let it happen that fast. They haven't exchanged any money at this point. So that'll be fascinating. But you see, Eli Lilly's doing what they can too. They bought that factory over in Wisconsin. And so, yeah, I think vials are still coming is the bottom line. We didn't get it on the earnings call, but I don't think that means it's not coming. They have to come up with $2 billion somewhere. I didn't get a good answer from you there or not. And I think it's because you're not quite ready to talk about where these vials are going to come from and how it's all going to work, because I don't know that you want to telegraph that to your competitors right now who are also trying to keep up with supply. It's a race for capacity, not market share. That's what's fresh. So there's a couple other things. I don't know if you caught my video today. There was a article that dropped today. This is a fascinating one. So a pharmaceutical company today by the name of, I'm going to get it here, Palatin. And Palatin makes a medication called bremelanotide. And bremelanotide is also known as Vyleesi. Now, Vyleesi is a drug that is actually used. Make sure your kids' little ears are off or they're in bed, or turn it down for a second. But bremelanotide is used to treat, I'm trying to remember the medical name of this, and it's going to escape me, and then it's going to get awkward. Let's just call it a sexual dysfunction in premenopausal women, right? Hyposexual desire disorder, I believe is what it's called. If I remember that off the top of my head without being able to find it in the notes, that's pretty good. But basically a low libido, right? And this is a peptide that acts on the MC4 receptors in your brain. But these same receptors, when they are activated, help people feel satiated, full, not hungry, right? There's a lot of innuendo baked in there. So what they got the approval to do was basically combine this treatment with tirzepatide to see if it enhances weight loss in tirzepatide. Now, this is a study of 60 participants, and it begins very soon, and we will have top-line data on this by the end of the year. So this will be a fascinating one to watch. So the name of this medication is Vyleesi. That's Vyleesi. Vyleesi. Bremelanotide injection. It's just a sub-Q injection. It comes in a pen similar to the pens that we've talked about here on this channel. And it's an injector pen, MC4 receptor agonist. So that will be a very interesting one to watch. And let me just tell you, with this shot, you might not get hungry, but you're going to be thirsty. Yeah, I mean? And that brings us to our next segment while we take out the track. I heard a lot of bad information this week. Holy crap. So many people are listening to the earnings calls now, and there's some people that just maybe shouldn't. So one of the things that I started getting hit with over and over and over after this earnings call was they're getting rid of the savings card. No, they're not. The savings card came up a little bit early on in the earnings call, and it came up again later. So I understand why people are like, ooh, savings card. They basically had to explain to investors again, and they've done this on every earnings call for probably the last 3 or 4 earnings call. They're making more money on Mounjaro now. They're making more money on it now. They're making more money because last year they discontinued the OG savings card. If you were one of the beneficiaries of the OG savings card, put OG in the chat, because the OG savings card got anybody who wanted Mounjaro for $25 when it first launched, right? And that gravy train lasted for about 6 months before Lilly goes, it's too many of y'all getting this for free. We're going to axe this. Then they said, we're going to require a diagnosis code. Then after that, they changed it. And then ultimately it just became where, if you're not diabetic, you're screwed. You're not going to get any benefit from the card. And if you did benefit from the card, you weren't going to benefit very much. Your insurance had to pay. And this is a natural progression as payers come on board with the new medication, start covering more of the medication, that the savings cards changes. But this is basically the higher realized prices is the word that they use, because people aren't using the older savings card. They're actually making more money on the scripts so they can write fewer scripts and make more money, right? That's the gist of what they were trying to explain. And in this process, they talked about canceling old savings cards. That's what happened last year. It's not what happened now. They're not getting rid of the savings cards. It would be a colossal mistake for any pharmaceutical company with a new medication that doesn't have excellent pay on the employer side to get rid of savings cards. They're not getting rid of the savings cards. And if you're one of those people who saw that video or those videos or wherever this is coming from, please just let people know the savings cards aren't going anywhere. So that's the first bit of fake news, but we're not going to stop there, because there was another bit of fake news. Before I get to this bit of fake news, because Carla and Jen Nebraska film me every week, I did want to tell you this at the top. So we had like a little friendship form in person with 2 of our favorite OnThePenners. Carla is Crafty and Jen Nebraska met, and I just wanted to share this with you. This is so fun, and this happened because of this community. This is fun. They sent me this just a few weeks ago, and these beautiful gals got to get together and meet in person. These are 2 lovely, lovely ladies. They've been around hanging out for a while here. Thank you for sharing that with me. That is so fun that y'all got to meet. And so you didn't remind me now, but I did remember, right? So back to the fake news. Check this out. And so I jokingly said on the podcast this week that you saw Viking Tide. They're just ramping up the dose on that because people are tolerating it really well. So they keep ramping up the dose in this phase 2 trial until people actually get some side effects from it, because the side effect profile is very, very low, which makes me think it's more of a GIP medicine than it is GLP-1, like Mounjaro, but maybe they amped up the GIP even more. But they're just not having the side effects, but they are having the weight loss, and so they're ramping it up. And I jokingly said, Viking Tide coming to a telemedicine company near you, right? And then I laughed, and I said, I shouldn't laugh because this will be a thing. Well, this isn't quite that, but it's close. Somebody shared this with me today. Henry Meds offering oral tirzepatide oral tirzepatide. Prescribed by prescribers. Oral tirzepatide has been tested absolutely nowhere. There's even, as far as I'm aware, there isn't even a phase 1 trial of oral tirzepatide. We have no idea what the bioavailability of oral tirzepatide is. We do know what the bioavailability is of Rybelsus, which is GLP-1, and it's not great. It's not great. It's the gremlin of a pill to take, and this is like one of those sublingual things. What are these companies doing? How are they getting away with it? And this is the type of crap that's going to ruin compounds for people. This is that negligent type of money grab at desperate people. And it's just, it's cheap and it's lame. And I'm sick of seeing this crap. Also, what's the link? So, yeah, I mean, it's one of those deals where it's just like, seriously, something bad is going to happen because these people are basically, selling untested versions of this stuff. They're like, it's okay. It's compound. It's allowed. All right. So we're just going to give people things that are not, FDA tested in any way. So I don't know. It's trash to me. It's trash to me. No, absolutely no. First of all, if you take it, don't expect much out of it. I can't imagine the bioavailability is going to be great in a sublingual. It's semaglutide to basically boil it down to its basic level. Rybelsus, which is oral semaglutide, is not very bioavailable. And basically the way it works is by sort of boring a small hole in your stomach lining and getting absorbed that way. That's the only way you actually get any of the peptide into your bloodstream and actually have it bind to receptors in your body. The stuff in the mouth, I don't see it working at all. I really don't. So, I mean, $299 a month and it's on sale. And oh yeah, and you get the telemedicine with your appointment and everything. It's $350 a month. How shady is this crap? Do better. I understand the compound versions from 503B pharmacies that are regulated by the FDA. Okay, I can get on board with that because there's shortages. People need their medicine. They shouldn't have to yo-yo on doses. They shouldn't have to stretch out doses. They shouldn't have to deviate from the approved titration schedule on their medicine. But this is nonsense. Y'all got to do better. Which leads me to the next segment of this show, which is going to be the interview that I talked about. So we did this interview with KXEL, Jeff Stein, a guy that I've been listening to since I was a young boy in the back of my dad's Rambler, driving through the Dairy Queen drive-through on a summer day, listening to talk radio. I was able to go on this program and talk about GLP-1s to help take the stigma out of these medications, help take the stigma out of the conversation about obesity and diabetes and diabesity. And I'm so grateful for the platform because this radio station has a very large reach, 50,000 watt generator. Of radio goodness, right? They call it the 50,000 watt beacon of freedom. And I'm going to share that interview with Mr. Stein with you all tonight. That's going to be our interview tonight, or what we've commonly referred to on this channel as our
hot channel.
KXEL Live and Local begins with a conversation with Dave Knapp. Mr. Knapp is in our studios in Waterloo. He is the driving force behind a website called OnThePen.com, a variety of other ancillary projects tied to it. First of all, thanks so much for taking the time.
Mr. Stein, thank you for having me this morning. It is great to be with you. I have been a long time, I was sharing with you, been a long time listener of 1540, a bona fide Rush baby. So I grew up listening to all the syndicated programs that 1540 has carried over the years. And that, well, it hasn't changed much. I'm an X-ray salesman, so I drive around the state every day, and I'm often tuned into KXEL.
Well, we very much appreciate that. How did you get involved with the topic of OnThePen.com? And I guess it's important first to define what that website is, and I'm guessing that the reason for doing it and how you got involved are interrelated.
Absolutely. So my story with On the Pen goes back to 2021, when in the fall I was actually diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. I have been somebody who, as an adult, my entire life has struggled with my weight, but the diagnosis of type 2 diabetes at 36 years old was a real wake-up call for me, because I felt like, even though I was overweight, I had been somebody who did not really eat the standard American diet. In other words, I've always been pretty conscientious of my carbohydrate intake and sugar intake, and felt like I had done things to maybe ward off, even though I've always carried extra weight, maybe ward that off. But there's so much I've learned since then about genetics and how these all play into not only the disease of type 2 diabetes, but obesity. So in receiving that diagnosis, basically what I did, Jeff, was I set out on a year of strict diet and exercise regimen to try to stay off medication, because I have not been somebody who has been usually eager to jump into the use of a medication when there are alternatives. And in this process, in 1 year of absolutely white knuckling it, I lost 7 pounds. I started the year at 319 pounds. I ended the year at 312 pounds after a year of absolutely white knuckling it. And my doctor was dumbfounded, scratching his head. He said, "I think you're probably a candidate for bariatric surgery. You fall into the category of maybe 5% of people that I come into contact with who have extreme metabolic disorder." And there's a lot I could go into on that, but won't bore you all with the details. But having been a candidate for bariatric surgery, I thought, even though I'm young, I'm a father of 4 kids, I want to do this let's do what the doctor is saying. I didn't have insurance coverage. And so since that was the case, he said, there's actually this new class of medications called GLP-1s. And GLP-1 medications are actually, what they're finding is they're basically a pharmaceutical way to regulate an imbalance of gut hormones, similar to what bariatric surgery does. So you're accomplishing a very similar thing hormonally through a medication that historically was only available through bariatric surgery.
So the medication that you're talking about is something they would give you in concert with bariatric surgery generally, but this isn't necessary. The surgery would not be necessary in your case?
So in some cases, you're absolutely right. In some cases, these treatments are used in concert with bariatric surgery, especially as it comes to maintenance. But what it actually is, maybe a little bit different way to couch it, would be they are a pharmaceutical answer to what has historically been something that could only be accomplished in certain individuals with surgery.
All right.
And some people, surgery isn't enough, and they need that extra hormone regulation. And so these medications are used oftentimes in what they call the maintenance process for somebody who has had bariatric surgery, lost the weight. But what's interesting, and so the name, to kind of answer your question, OnThePen.com is just sort of this phrase that I've used for anybody who uses these medications, because I brought some visual aids. Obviously, your users or your listeners can't see this.
Hold it up real close to the microphone.
Yeah, right here. So you can see that, everybody? I'll crinkle the bag so at least you know that I have a prop. Yeah. So there are these pens, right, that inject the medication. Most of them are a once weekly injection. And so OnThePen just comes from that. And these are actually, if you want to hear a very interesting story, I'll try to be real brief, but a lot of people right now are like, these medications, we don't know the long-term implications. They're brand new. And there is a black box warning on these medications for medullary thyroid cancer for people who have had a family history. That is because in the phase 1 trials, it has been observed in rats. Rats actually have a receptor on their thyroid that humans do not. So it's not been observed or proved in humans that this is actually a thing. But kind of going back to the origins, Byetta, which was the first GLP-1. Now, GLP-1 is a hormone made naturally in your gut, where these are basically synthetic versions of GLP-1 that are just peptides, long chains of amino acids that bind to the same receptors as naturally occurring hormones. But in somebody who's obese or diabetic or metabolically ill, they're completely dysregulated in these hormones. And these hormones are responsible for delaying gastric emptying, helping you feel full in the pleasure reward center of your brain, increasing the amount of insulin your body makes when you need it, and sort of on demand. They were initially discovered for the treatment of diabetes by a doctor in Arizona. And this doctor, what he had noticed, and this is fascinating, The doctor was seeing patients come in from the desert who had been on hikes who had been bitten by a Gila monster, which is a native lizard in Arizona. And what he found is these patients would come in and they'd come in with low blood sugars. So he said, well, what is this low blood sugar thing about? So basically what they did is they isolated a peptide in the Gila monster venom that mimicked this natural occurring hormone in the body. And so the first generations of these medicines, which came out about 25 years ago, were actually used to treat type 2 diabetes. But through the evolution of medical science, through what they've learned with bariatric surgery and the discovery of many, many hormones that are related to managing weight in people, they've honed these medications in to mimic not only GLP-1 hormones, but the medication that I take, which is Mounjaro. Maybe you've heard of Zepbound, which is the latest and greatest. Most people have heard of Ozempic, right? That's the buzzword. But there are even newer versions mimicking other hormones that are actually bringing people bariatric surgery level weight loss, as well as, for somebody who like me is a type 2 diabetic, excellent blood sugar control.
OnThePen.com is the website. Dave Knapp is our guest. And for the audience's benefit, the pens that you brought, the best way I can describe that is an old school magic marker. You know, they were probably about 4 to 5 inches long, had a cap on the end, you know, the good old school magic markers. That's essentially what it looks like to me. And are these ones where you dial a dose and then punch it into the skin?
Yes, so some are like that. Some are single dose medications. So the one that I take, Mounjaro, you get a monthly supply. It's 4 pens. So it's a once weekly injection, and that pen holds 1 dose. The Ozempic pen.
Where do you inject?
So there are multiple areas on the body. It depends on which medication you're on and what the package insert says, but generally it's the top of the thighs. It is within an inch of your navel or on the backside of the arms is typically the injections.
And so I have a little knowledge about the insulin injections, and it used to be people would grab a wad of skin near the navel, as you say, or the thigh. All right, so that's somewhat consistent with what others may understand about that sort of thing.
It's a great reference point, and actually, I'm glad that you brought that up because these companies that make these GLP-1 medications, the two companies that make them currently are Novo Nordisk and Eli Lilly, both companies with a rich history in diabetic treatment. Eli Lilly being the first manufacturer of synthetic insulin, I believe. And so it's the next evolution in diabetes treatment, where I talked a little bit about earlier how they actually help your pancreas. They act on the beta cells in your pancreas to secrete insulin on demand. So in other words, as you need it, Jeff, as your blood sugars rise, the stimulation of the beta cell pancreases allows the pancreas to release insulin and bring that insulin level up and the blood sugars down. So it's using your natural insulin. And what they're learning with some recent studies is that they're actually helping to preserve beta cell function in not only type 2 diabetics, Jeff, but early on, if they can intervene with type 1 diabetics, they're seeing they can actually preserve some beta cell function in type 1 diabetics. So the future of these medications is really, really fascinating.
Now, a lot of people would have gotten a diagnosis, they'd have done their research, they would have asked their doctors a lot of questions, and they would have been very happy to have good results, move on with their lives, raise the family, and be grateful for the advent of modern science. You have done all that, but you're not just in here talking to me on the radio about what you have learned and what you have experienced, but this has become much bigger than that. As we said, the website, and that's just the beginning of it because the website contains all manner of videos, etc. At what point did you decide there's a message here that needs to be shared with a broader public, not just within my family and close circle of friends?
That's an excellent question. I've always been somewhat of an evangelist. As a 3 or 4 year old boy, I would preach to the cars driving by on the street. So I've always been sort of an evangelist. If something I feel is life changing, it's almost like a calling to share.
Sure.
And the second that I learned about, when I was diagnosed and I was given the information about this medication, I went immediately to the internet to find information, and all I could find was videos about people. I lost 100 pounds on Ozempic. And that was the type of content, but nothing that taught me anything other than, hey, these really work of information. As I learn, I want to share that. And really, it's taken on a life of its own. Because,
and in a neutral way. right? Because to me, if I'm looking for information, often I'm worried about the source. Is it a clinic that could be funded by a pharmaceutical company? Is it a pharmaceutical company, et cetera? And so I dismiss a lot of information because I don't trust the motivations of the source. You're, and this is meant in a very positive way, you're a guy who has dealt with it, and you're sharing the knowledge. You've got no axe to grind near as I can tell.
Yeah. And that's an excellent point. And to be honest with you, Jeff, not one that really I've given a ton of thought to. So I think that's a fascinating point to hear. Having that perspective that is sort of like unadulterated, and yes, not from anybody who's really seeking to, make a buck. Right now, do I hope to capitalize on this and make a career of it? I would love that to be the case, but not at the expense of compromising sort of the neutrality, because there are downsides of these medications that people should be very aware of. Some of the things that I told you that they do, like delaying gastric emptying, not everybody tolerates these medicines the same way. So you have issues sometimes with some GI side effects are very common, and they're going to be a spectrum. Some people have them to the point that they end up in the hospital. That happens. Some people never have a single side effect. But to be able to share that, both sides of that, and I have the distinct pleasure of having, thousands of followers that I interact with every day. So being able to share their experience, and if I may, just for one moment, one of the coolest things that's come out of this is I follow these companies very closely. I follow the FDA very closely as far as what kind of information they're releasing about these medications. And one of the huge issues with these medications right now, Jeff, is that they just can't make enough of them. This is the reason I just started making this content, is because I thought this is huge. Everybody knows and loves somebody who has struggled with their weight their whole life, right? And obesity especially is a very misunderstood disease.
It's not just the medical complications that can come from being overweight or to a category of obese. That in and of itself is something, but the fact that there are shortages for treatment, and it's not as easy as to say, well, just push yourself away from the table.
Absolutely. Eat less, move more is the mantra. And
it's much more complicated.
If it were
than
that easy, like I always tell people, Jeff, I've probably lost 500 pounds in my life. I've never weighed 500 pounds,
right? But
I've probably lost 500 pounds in my life.
You've lost the same 20 pounds over and over.
It's this, yes, 20, 50, whatever it may be. And, that takes a toll on you metabolically. And I would leave that conversation to the doctors. But there's a shortage of these. There's not only a shortage of good information out there, which is why I get worried about some of the interesting stuff that's going on with TikTok right now, and some suppression of this kind of content, which I think is well-meaning at the root, but in practice. But I was able to identify the ability for these manufacturers to manufacture these medications in single-dose vials, very similarly to the way that they've manufactured insulin in the past. These manufacturers have the capacity. It's just that there's patents on these pens, and these pens are they help to control how insurance companies pay for these medications, how patients administer them, and ultimately it comes down to the almighty dollar. But they have the capacity to release these in single-dose vials if they so choose. Well, we saw Eli Lilly several weeks ago get a actual approval by the FDA to present these medications in single-dose vials. And so I started a hashtag campaign to release the vials. That has actually gotten a ton of traction. We've actually gotten some national acknowledgement from some media in the press. But I'll be looking very closely to Eli Lilly's upcoming earnings call on the 30th, which I'll be covering on all of my social media platforms. I always do. But we are looking for them to release the vials, because if they do, it's a pressure release valve for this intense supply crunch right now. Listen, I have viewers who have called up to 300 pharmacies in their state in a day to try to locate their medication. I have followers who have driven 9 hours to an adjacent state to find their dose of medication. It tells you two things, right? There's a huge problem with availability and scarcity of these medications, but also what lengths people will be willing to go through in their desperation to get treatment for their disease.
What's the reason for the shortage? Is it a lack of foresight in terms of trying to get a a work plan in place so that they can be produced? Is it a matter of if we limit the supply, the demand will go up and we can make more money?
I think it's a fair point to make that the hype around these medications is advantageous to the drug companies. I think I would couch this a little bit differently.
Okay.
Novo Nordisk was the first to the party with the household name Ozempic, which was released in maybe 2021 for type 2 diabetes, and everybody knows the Ozempic. It became a household name just by virtue of the jingle, right? But then people found out these diabetics are losing weight on this thing. And so Novo Nordisk, within about another 2 years, had that same drug, it's called semaglutide, approved for chronic weight management. And Wegovy is the name of that. Novo Nordisk way underestimated the demand for the drug. A drug like semaglutide, when you actually get into the numbers, but they did. And
don't forget the concept of vanity of people. And again, we're talking about health issues.
Sure.
But when someone is told, take this drug, yeah, it's a little pricey, but you don't have to put in the work, that just seems to be endemic in the culture these days, let's say. So to your point about how could they underestimate it, given that they are contributors in fostering that perfect image, it makes it even more perplexing.
Yeah, absolutely. It is astounding. I always talk about on my different channels, whether it's the podcast or the show or the blog or whatever it is, how Novo Nordisk has fumbled this in such a big way is astounding. So Eli Lilly, sort of the second to the party, but with the next generation of these medications, actually did have a little bit more foresight. I mean, they're writing 100,000 new prescriptions per week of Zepbound. So if we just do the math there, it came at Zepbound, which is the chronic weight management version of Mounjaro, the diabetic drug, tirzepatide being the active ingredient in both, was released for chronic weight management about early December. By the end of December, they were writing 25,000 scripts per month of a brand new drug. By the end of January, they were writing 75,000. They're writing 100,000 scripts a week. That's 4 pens per month per user. So every month, they're putting a demand of these very plasticky, wasteful pens. By my calculation, that's 1.6 million additional pens that they have to manufacture each month. So Eli Lilly, in the news yesterday, they just acquired a facility that was built by a small family company in Wisconsin called Nexus. They just bought their facility because they have the ability to it's an FDA approved facility. It's brand new and they can manufacture these medications. So they're buying up, and Novo Nordisk doing the same thing. Novo Nordisk is trying to acquire a company called Catalent, which is responsible for a huge number of generic medications, manufacturing generic medications. They just $16 billion just tried to buy the whole thing just for the manufacturing capacity so that they can try to meet demand for their blockbuster weight loss drugs. So they're investing billions and billions and billions. And once you hear the CEOs and the C-level executives from these companies talking, it's astounding. They're like, it's not money that's keeping us from being able to build. It's just having the people and the resources to do it. In other words, if they could just snap their fingers and spend the money, they would do it. And you see them doing it by gobbling up small medicine manufacturers around the world.
So is there a danger, and these are my phrases, not yours, so correct me if I'm way off the farm on this. There's a vanity purpose for some of these medications. There is a medical purpose for some of these medications. Are we in danger of having those whose medical needs, and you alluded to it earlier, I just want to put a finer point on it. Are we in danger of folks who need pharmaceuticals for medical purposes losing out because there is this vanity element?
I think it's a fair concern. I think anytime there's scarcity, there's this tendency to want to put a hierarchy on who has dibs on the supply. And I think your point is valid. And I think you have seen Eli Lilly put out around the Oscars. They put out this whole campaign that was like, this wasn't made for you if you're trying to fit into a dress. This was made for people who are sick. And I thought that was a nice gesture, but I think if the capacity were there, I'm a big advocate for, and this is something I've said since the first days I was making videos in the corner of my basement. I'm a big fan of doctors making decisions with patients without outside influence on what those decisions are. So the vanity debate, I think, is a valid one, especially when there's scarcity. But I think, doctors and patients should be able to come together and make those decisions, and they shouldn't be made by insurance companies or PBMs. They shouldn't be made by anybody but those two. And so doctors and patients, I think I'm a big advocate for doctors and patients. And
sure.
And in this arena, I mean, you see I see it on social media every day. You're taking medicine from the diabetics. I mean, there's this big debate because, now that you have the chronic weight management version of both of these medications, semaglutide and tirzepatide respectively, that has kind of gone away. But even then, it's like, are they making too many of the weight loss ones? Could they be helping the diabetics? And so it is definitely a contentious point of argument on social media.
I found it, as you told the story of, here's the company running ads during the Oscars saying, now this is not for you just to fit into a dress. And all around the commercial, here are the beautiful people, right? Here are the people. This is what you should emulate. And the mixed messages, but that's nothing new in society. Dave Knapp is our guest. OnThePen.com is the website. And I keep saying it's a website, but that's really the portal and a jumping off point for so much more.
Absolutely. OnThePen.com is sort of the rally point of all of the social media content. It's no new news to anybody who has followed the news in the last 5 or 6 years. There's an incredible amount of censorship that goes on these social media platforms. And so from the time that I started building out a community on YouTube, I had seen enough before with how YouTube has handled other hot button issues in culture to know I'm not going to put all my eggs in the YouTube basket. And so I built that web, being a marketer, I built that website right away so that I could, kind of have a rally point where if I was here on social media or there, and it went away, that we would have this one hub that everyone could kind of gather around. And so it's become really, like I said, a feeding point for all of my social media content, but more so the news hub, because that's what I have really positioned myself as in this niche of GLP-1 incretin mimetic therapies, is the news guy. And so it's important to me to kind of foster a place where people can feel like they can come and they can get news, like you said earlier, from the perspective of somebody who uses these medications, who hasn't, been bought by somebody who has an agenda for me to say this or that about these medications.
Where do you hope this, and I'm calling it a mission, goes? Because as you said, you've now drawn national attention, probably global attention, but other media outlets nationally have said, who's this guy in Iowa and why is he doing this? So where does this go from here? It is not your current day job, but it sure seems to be taking productively an awful lot of your time. And I say that with admiration. That's not a criticism.
So it's a fair question, right? I have put a lot of my peripheral time. It's a question my wife often asks.
I didn't want to go there.
No, she's very supportive of this, and she has been equally, astounded at the life of its own that it has sort of taken on. The end game is to help people, to help more and more people, for more and more people to hear the gospel of GLP-1s. I always jokingly refer to myself as a GLP-1 evangelist. And so the more people that get help from the content that I create and the information I'm able to provide, which, by the way, is not just my opinion or my take or my quick lookup of something online. I actually have a show on YouTube. It happens every Thursday night where I have cardiologists come on and talk about these medications. I'll have bariatric surgeons, prominent bariatric surgeons, come on and talk about these medications, as well as other members of the community who have seen benefit from these medications. So it's not like it's just me. But like I said, the more people that can understand these medications and really break the stigma of obesity, because again, obesity is such a misunderstood disease, right? Not everybody who is overweight has obesity, but for people who have obesity, it is a real problem that we're fighting against biology to beat. And these medications are a tool to help. Are they the be all end all? Absolutely, they're not. but they are a powerful tool in the arsenal of somebody who is trying to combat these diseases. The more people we can help, Jeff, the better I feel about resting my head on the pillow at night of all the peripheral time that I could be using in other ways, but using towards, creating more content to help more people.
It's certainly a worthwhile cause, and the amount of information from all the sources that you've gathered, it is truly admirable. OnThePen.com, the jumping off point, and then you can follow Dave Knapp on the various social media sites that you can see from that jumping off point of OnThePen.com. Thank you for being so open about your personal situation, because again, as I suggested, it gives great credibility to the whole topic, and it is not easy to just open oneself up this way, and I appreciate you doing it online and with us.
Thank you so much for opening your door to me to have this conversation. I know it was a little out of left field probably when I reached out, but I just feel so passionately that the more we can take the stigma out of these medications and the diseases that they treat, the better off society will be. And so I just really appreciate the platform and the time today, Jeff.
Do keep us posted on how all of this goes. Dave Knapp, OnThePen.com is the website, and he joined us in studio on News Talk 1540 KXEL, where Iowa comes to talk.
Thank you. Muted. Yep. Thank you. Y'all were on top of that. If you want to do me a favor, KXEL, Kilo, Edward, X-Ray, Libra, right? KXEL. Make sure that you go over to their social medias and let them know at KXEL, whether it's Twitter or Facebook, let them know that you enjoyed that interview. If you could do that, just give them some feedback on social media. It was so kind of them to give some airtime to a guy who is just trying to help change the narrative around the conversation of obesity and the struggle that it is to live with it, and the fact that it is a disease, and to help take the stigma out of these medications. Because if you notice, there's a lot of talk in this interview about vanity. And I think that question arises because that is the narrative outside of the bubble that we sort of live in on YouTube, on TikTok, online. We live in this bubble where we sort of say something about the disease we live in or the medication we're on, and everybody goes, amen, cheers, absolutely, you go get them, like, share, save. Outside of this bubble, the world goes, this is just people taking the easy way out. This is just people taking it to lose a few pounds. This is just for vanity. And the opportunity, I'm so glad that Jeff brought those topics up, because that is exactly the narrative that we are trying to educate people on. Obesity is a disease. It leads to hormonal dysregulation. There are so many hormones associated with obesity, and these new medications just touch on a couple. We've talked even on the members only pre-stream. We talked about how Novo Nordisk has the oral amycretin. They have CagriSema, other pathways outside of just incretin hormones, which we talk about a lot. That's GLP, GIP, and some others. But you also have, this news that we heard about today that we shared earlier in this stream about the MC4 receptors, combining that with GLP-1. Listen, they're just starting to touch on how to address the hormonal dysregulation that comes along with obesity, and being able to have an opportunity to change the narrative, or at least to tell the other side of the story, to tell the science side of a story that has historically been wrapped in in this narrative of morality is just such a great opportunity. So thank you to Jeff Stein. Thank you to KXEL. Thank you to Rudy for the $20 super chat. Very kind and generous of you. We rely, hey, as just a side note, everything we do here relies on your generosity. So everyone who gave gifts tonight, and I just want to go through and give a special shout out to Corey, Mimi, Sue the Dude, Mama Slew, Sabrina, and Rudy, all gave super chats tonight. We rely on your generosity to do this. I mean, I talked in this interview. He's like, dude, you put a lot of time into this. It is virtually all of my peripheral time. If I'm not at work and I'm not with my kids, even on my lunch breaks, I am taking my lunch breaks to make content. I am using my drive time to listen to things, to learn more, to bring the information. So the gifts that you all give, Corey, Mimi, Sue, Mama Slew, Sabrina, Rudy, and everyone who's a member in this chat, this is why I can continue to do this. Without those gifts, I could not continue to do this. I just could never justify the time that I put into it. But because you do, that allows me to do things like this and to do things like that interview. And to do things like talk to the CNN reporter today and talk to Madison Moeller from Bloomberg and talk to, whoever it may be, just Yahoo Finance. This thing is just taken on a life of its own. Sue the Dude with 5 more memberships. Thank you, buddy. And I'm sure those who are receiving those gifts really, really appreciate that as well. It just, you provide the growth of this thing. And this has really become something. I tell people it's when people in my real life, like, what do you do? Like, well, I started a channel to try to share about the medication that I'm on, and it's sort of become a whole deal. And that whole deal is you all. So thank you. I've got a $99.99 super chat tonight from Corey. Corey has the opportunity to choose where I inject this tonight. Thank you so much for all the generosity tonight. Thank you to Jeff Stein and KXEL. Please go find KXEL on all the social media channels and let them know how much you enjoyed tonight's stream. Oh yeah, Jennifer, Nebraska gives via Venmo like every month. And so thank you, Jen, I know that you just gave a gift just a couple of days ago. Venmo, Cash App, or other ways too. So thank you for bringing that up. But Jessica with a $9.99 super chat. It is my pleasure. And you all give me this platform. So thank you so much. She said earlier in the stomach. All right. So great. Right side or left? Right side or left? Her boy's graduating college. That's great. Tummy. I'm going to go with tummy. Right side or left, folks? I'm a left-handed individual. If you are a lefty, I'd like to hear from you. I think we're just wired different. Left side or right side. But if you are a lefty, let me know in the chat. So right-hand side, we'll go ahead and do this thing. Thank you to all the gift givers tonight who have made this possible. Matt, I didn't even know you were here, dude. Jessica's a lefty. Holla. Karen's a lefty. Who else is a lefty in the chat? Matt, you never disappoint, my friend. Sabrina's a lefty, although I think I knew that about you, Sabrina. There's a kinship. We're wired differently. We see the world differently. We really do. It's a thing. Anna, you're a lefty too? Awesome. You should be a lefty, but sadly a righty. That's okay. My wife is a righty. So the person I love most in this world is a righty. We've got 2 boys. 2 of our 4 are lefties. Isn't that interesting? Doesn't happen often. So we injected in the 15 milligram. I don't know if y'all saw that. 15 milligram. Let's see how this baby works this week. I got to remember to take my peptide bite. Left-handed baby preachers. Yeah. Preaching at the cars, man. I think I got some family videos of that. I should try to digitize that and start an episode with that sometime. Yeah. I sent an email about the Metabolic Health Summit last week. Oh, I didn't see that, Liz. I did not see that. I'll have to double check. So yeah, a little update. Flex So I flashed them across the bottom of the screen. They have been so good about helping me find my medicine every month. We moved up to 15. So this will be the first week at 15 milligram dose, and we'll see how it goes. 15 milligrams made me very, very tired last time around. So I got to make sure to take my peptide vite. If you are interested, peptide vite is great. I used it when I switched from tirzepatide to semaglutide, and it was, I never experienced any side effects. So you can check that out here. I'll scroll that across the bottom of the screen for a minute. zennutrients.com/Mounjaro, man. You'd code David K. It'll save you 10%. But I love peptide vite. It's really, really, really good stuff. And it's an easy way to support the channel, especially if you deal with any side effects on GLP-1s. I really recommend it. I use it myself. I love it. So yeah, thank you for being here. Thank you for being the best part of what we do here at On the Pen. You all make it happen here. And I couldn't do it without you. Shouldn't do it without you. Couldn't do it without you. So until next week, when we'll do this all again, we'll have a podcast in between here, and then make sure you go give the podcast a like, 5-star rating and review. But until next week, may the Lord bless you all and keep you all. May he make his face shine upon you all. And may he be gracious to each and every one of you. Thank you for being a part of On the Pen with ManOnMounjaro, and we will catch you next week on the Pen.